A high-pitched siren screeched through the sterile air of the interspecies medical ward, followed by a shrill voice over the comm. Emergency biohazard protocol activated. Containment room 7. Unknown infection vector. Inside room 7, Dr. Pellex of the Yevnari Medical Corps flailed his forearms in a blur of panic. His skin, a slick, pale lavender, had flushed to a blotchy crimson around the joints as he stared at the human sitting calmly on the examination table. "Remain still," Pellex barked, voice cracking. "Do not touch the wound. I must isolate the pathogen before it enters your bloodstream." The human, a man in his late 30s with a squared jaw, rough stubble, and a muddy green flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows, raised a brow. "It's not a pathogen," he said, reaching into a small first aid pouch on his hip. "It's a dog bite." Dr. Pellex's lower eye twitched. "What is a dog and how did it breach our planetary perimeter?" the man sighed, pulling out an antiseptic wipe. It's a pet, like a domestic animal. 4 legs, teeth, tail. This one just got spooked when I bent down to pet it." "Spooked? It attacked you?" Pellex reeled backward, staggering into a wall panel which hissed at the impact. "You've been injected with unknown organic saliva. You must be quarantined." "Name's Sawyer Zane, by the way," the human said, ignoring the flashing red lights as he cleaned the crescent of puncture marks on his forearm. A thin rivulet of blood had already started drying. "Sawyer." "Not human, and no offense, Doc, but you're overreacting." Pellex blinked all 3 eyes in rapid succession. "Do not move, do not self-treat. You are tampering with a potentially lethal interspecies contamination. I need to initiate a level 7 cleanse." "I washed it, that's what we do." "Wash, disinfect, bandage, and maybe a tetanus shot. It's not a big deal." Pellex stared at the human's wound, then at the antiseptic wipe, then back at the wound. He activated a surgical scanner from the ceiling. "No," he whispered. "This cannot be." Sawyer glanced at the scanner's readout. "It's not broken, just a bite. See, I've had worse. You should have seen what happened when I worked construction in Kentucky. Rebar to the thigh, that was a Tuesday. You survived a metal rod to the leg. Yeah, Doc. Humans are tougher than we look." Pellex staggered back again and collapsed into a diagnostic chair. "You are infected, you must be. This is the beginning stage. The irrational calm, the underreaction, classic symptoms of neurotoxicity." Sawyer peeled a bandage from the kit and wrapped his arm. "Doc, I'm not calm because I'm impaired. I'm calm because I've had dogs my whole life. They bite sometimes. It's what they do." The door hissed open. A tall, sharp-faced Yevnari female in a dark coat stepped in, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Pellex, your emergency alert triggered a station-wide lockdown. Explain." Pellex pointed a trembling finger at Sawyer. "He has been assaulted by a terrestrial organism known as a dog and is now exhibiting distressingly casual symptoms." The female alien turned to Sawyer. "Is this true?" Sawyer held up his bandaged arm. "Bit me right here. Little guy got scared when I walked in on the habitat deck. Probably shouldn't have squatted down so fast." She looked at Pellex. "You panicked the entire station over a bite." He said it wasn't a big deal. Pellex sputtered. "That is evidence of deep psychological compromise," Sawyer chuckled, then winced slightly. "Okay, it hurts, yeah, but I don't think I'm gonna mutate." The female Yevnari blinked slowly, processing. "You will submit to a pathogen screening regardless." "Sure," Sawyer nodded. "Scan away." "But I'm telling you, Doc, we've had dogs for thousands of years. If anything, I'm more worried about him getting sick from me." Pellex gasped. 2 hours later, Sawyer sat in a medical lounge sipping a lukewarm cup of something that claimed to be tea. His arm was wrapped in a sleek Yevnari polymer bandage, and a monitor on the wall was displaying a scan of his immune system in garish detail. Pellex paced in the corner, muttering, "Your phagocytes. They increased production within minutes. Spontaneous immune reinforcement." "It's impossible." "I had my shots," Sawyer said. "Tetanus, rabies, you name it. Standard protocol for anyone working around animals. You expected to be attacked? Well, no, but you prepare for the worst." Pellex stared at him. Why would you interact with an animal capable of wounding you? Because they're worth it, Sawyer said, his tone softening. Dogs aren't just animals. They're family. The alien doctor froze, visibly struggling with the concept. Sawyer leaned forward. You've never had something bite you and still love it, have you? Pellex blinked. No, then you've never had a dog. For the next 2 days, Pellex ran every non-invasive test he could without violating interspecies ethics protocols. Sawyer endured it with the patience of someone who had once broken his leg during a hiking trip and waited 4 hours for a medevac. By day 3, Pellex called a meeting. 12 Yevnari scientists, a Terran liaison officer, and one very bored Sawyer sat in a conference room. Pellex stood at the front, a projection of Sawyer's bite wound behind him. This is the first documented case of a human being wounded by a non-sentient terrestrial organism on a Yevnari vessel, he began. Sawyer raised a hand. What about when Jenkins got scratched by that cat last month? That was superficial, Pellex snapped. This is penetrative trauma, and yet no infection, no systemic failure, no behavioral degradation. This suggests humans possess a remarkable level of immunological compensation. The Terran liaison leaned forward. We've always known that. Humans are adaptable. Pellex turned back to the screen. Not adaptable, resilient. The human did not panic. He followed a centuries-old protocol handed down through oral and written tradition. He self-treated with minimal equipment. And this part is critical. He did not seek to destroy the animal that harmed him. Sawyer folded his arms. Didn't seem right. The dog was just scared. Pellex seemed genuinely moved. This compassion in the face of injury is not something we anticipated. The room fell silent. Finally, the liaison spoke. So what's the recommendation? Pellex looked down at his notes, then back up. We must study this further. The dog must be quarantined and scanned but not destroyed. And the human Sawyer Zane should be monitored for long-term immunological anomalies. Sawyer groaned. Do I get hazard pay for this? No, Pellex said. Later that evening, Sawyer returned to the habitat deck, arm still tender but functional. The dog, a shaggy little mutt with oversized ears, was sitting behind a transparent barrier, chewing on a synthetic bone. You get me in trouble again, Sawyer said, kneeling slowly, and I'm naming you lawsuit. The dog wagged its tail behind him. Pellex watched from a distance, recording notes on a silent pad. He had never seen anything like it, a species that treated injury as inconvenience, pain as manageable. And the creature that caused it not an enemy but a friend. He didn't understand it, not yet, but he would. And somewhere deep in his alien brain a strange thought passed. Maybe resilience wasn't just about biology, maybe it was about choice. The dog, recently cleared for monitored reintroduction to the habitat deck, had discovered a vent panel that vibrated when pawed at, and was currently engaging it in a spirited one-sided battle. Sawyer leaned against the railing above, chewing on a protein bar that tasted vaguely like old cardboard and seaweed. Pellex stood beside him, 2 of his hands folded while the other 2 held a scanning wand and a scribble pad. The dog barked once at the vent, spun in a circle, then flopped dramatically on its side. He appears to be unstable, Pellex muttered. Unpredictable behavior, intermittent aggression followed by apparent unconsciousness. He's playing, Sawyer said, mouth full. You don't have pets on your homeworld. Creatures are either domesticated for utility or relocated if they pose risk. Emotional attachment is not expected. That's bleak. Pellex didn't respond. He was focused on the scanner, which hummed softly as it tracked the dog's biometrics. After a moment, he turned it towards Sawyer, the pale blue light sweeping over his torso. You scanned me like 50 times already, Sawyer said, brushing crumbs off his shirt. This is a comparative reading. I'm attempting to identify any shared immunological response between you and the animal. You think I transferred immunity. It is unlikely. But so is surviving a puncture wound from an unclassified quadruped without inflammatory cascade or localized necrosis. Localized necrosis sounds like something I don't want. It is. The dog sneezed, then immediately tried to catch its own tail. Pellex flinched. You sure you don't want to adopt him? Sawyer said. I feel like you two would get along. I am not equipped for cohabitation with volatile fauna. He's not volatile, he's curious, there's a difference. Pellex tapped the pad with one delicate finger. His heart rate fluctuates erratically. His respiratory rhythm is inconsistent. These are not traits of a stable specimen. He's a mutt, that's normal. That word again, normal, you use it to dismiss anomalies. No, Sawyer said, finishing the protein bar with a grimace. I use it because I've seen worse. Normal doesn't mean ideal. It just means expected. Pellex stared at him. You expect chaos, pretty much. There was a long pause. The dog sneezed again, louder this time, and then bolted in a rapid zigzag toward a discarded boot someone had left near a maintenance hatch. Pellex made a strained sound. He's chewing footwear. Sawyer glanced down. Yeah, that's mine. You left your clothing unattended in a shared environment. I was changing out of my Eva suit. The boot was damp and smelled like ammonia. I figured I'd air it out. Your species tolerates external contamination remarkably well. We don't tolerate it, we just live with it. Pellex turned the scanner off. You say these things casually, as if expecting injury, filth, and disarray is a reasonable approach to life. Not reasonable. Just realistic. The dog, now triumphant in its conquest of the boot, trotted toward them with its tail high and mouth open in a crooked, panting grin. Pellex backed up. Sawyer crouched and ruffled the dog's ears. He likes you, you know. He should not. I sedated him for transport and ran 12 invasive scans. He doesn't hold grudges. That is biologically improbable, Sawyer shrugged. He's not running algorithms, he's just trying to figure out who gives him snacks. Pellex looked mildly offended. You imply affection is transactional. It can be. Sometimes it's just about trust. Feed him, don't hit him, he'll follow you around for weeks. I have not fed him. Then he probably thinks you're a weird furniture-shaped tree. The dog sat down at Pellex's feet and yawned. Pellex stared down at it. He is staring at me. What does that mean? Could be anything. Trying to gauge your mood, waiting for a command, or maybe he's just wondering why you smell like antiseptic and regret. I do not. Smell of regret, only a little. Pellex looked back at his pad. Your species relies on intuition to navigate interspecies behavior. That is, difficult to quantify. Well, you ever try quantifying love? I have attempted. How'd that go? There were charts. Sawyer laughed quietly and sat cross-legged on the floor. The dog immediately climbed into his lap and began licking his face. Pellex recoiled again. That is unhygienic. Yep, you allow this, every time. Pellex looked genuinely unsettled. How do you prevent ocular contamination? I blink. Pellex stared, horrified. That is your entire strategy, pretty much. The dog flopped sideways, half on Sawyer's leg, and began snoring. Pellex watched as the human absent-mindedly scratched the dog's belly. I do not understand you, he said finally. That's fair. You prioritize comfort over sterility. Emotion over logic, you invite chaos into your physical space. Yeah, Sawyer said, but in return I get loyalty, companionship, sometimes laughter, and disease. Not if you wash your hands. Pellex turned and walked 3 paces away, muttering again. Sawyer leaned back on one elbow. You know, Doc, you ever considered that maybe we're not the weird ones? Pellex turned slowly. You allow creatures into your home with claws, you sleep beside them, you clean their excrement with your bare hands. Well, not bare. There are bags. You describe this as normal. I'd describe it as worth it. Pellex didn't respond. He simply stared at the dog, who made a soft huffing noise and twitched one leg in a dream. After a moment, he stepped closer. What is his designation? No name yet. I was thinking boots after the footwear he wrecked. Pellex looked down. He responds to vocal cues, sometimes. Pellex crouched awkwardly, 2 knees bending, the others adjusting for balance. His eyes scan the dog from a safe distance. He appears. Content? Yeah. It is not sedated. Nope. What if it bites again? Then I'll wash it again. Pellex's upper right hand hovered over the dog without touching. Go on, Sawyer said. He doesn't bite unless you're a threat or made of ham. Pellex hesitated, then lowered his hand. The dog shifted slightly, sniffed his fingers, then promptly licked his palm. Pellex froze. You're contagious now, Sawyer said. Pellex stood up so fast he nearly tripped. It was a joke, Sawyer added. Mostly. 2 hours passed. By then, the dog had a blanket, a nameplate, and a designated corner in the habitat deck lined with soft insulation. Pellex hadn't spoken since the lick. At station dusk, as the artificial lights dimmed in gradual cascade, Sawyer found him in the observation tier, hunched over a console. I've been reviewing historical footage, Pellex said without turning. Human-canine interactions. There's a recorded incident in which a juvenile human fell into a frozen lake attempting to retrieve a dog. The rescue attempt required 3 emergency responders, a hovercraft, and an inflatable ladder. Yeah, that tracks. Why risk so much? It's not a thing you calculate, it's a thing you do. Pellex was silent for a long time. Then very quietly, I do not understand. Sawyer joined him at the console, leaning forward. Maybe you don't have to, maybe just accept that some bonds aren't logical. Pellex narrowed his eyes. That is an unsatisfying answer. Yeah. But it's true. They watched the simulated stars outside the viewport flicker into artificial night. Pellex's fourth hand tapped the console once, almost absently. I have requisitioned a feeding dish. Sawyer smiled. That's a start. 3 days later, Pellex stood in the station's sanitation chamber, arms crossed, watching as Sawyer poured a bucket of soapy water into a shallow basin lined with absorbent cloth. The dog, now officially registered as Boots in the station logs, was standing in the middle of it, tail wagging like a malfunctioning metronome as Sawyer gently scrubbed his paws with a soft brush. I reviewed your hygiene protocols, Pellex said, his voice edged with uncertainty. Your species utilizes manual washing instead of full-body sterilization units. Why? Well, for one, he'd panic in a sterilizer, Sawyer said, keeping his tone even as Boots tried to lick the soap off his own leg. Plus, this way I can check for cuts or ticks while I go. Pellex twitched slightly. You are using tactile inspection. You've got 3 eyes and 4 hands and you're still weirded out by a bath. It is not the cleansing. It is the direct exposure to microbial surfaces. Sawyer lifted one of Boots' back legs. You can't care for something properly unless you're willing to get your hands dirty. Pellex hesitated. And if the creature defecates during this process, then I clean it up. With your hands, with gloves. I'm not unhinged. Pellex walked a slow circle around the basin, keeping a consistent meter between himself and the dog. I have also observed that you allow the creature onto your bed. This is not mandated in your species' behavioral code. Not everything we do is in a handbook. The brush moved in rhythmic circles, lather building between the dog's toes. Boots leaned into it, eyes half-lidded. You're seeing trust in action, Sawyer added. He lets me handle his feet because he knows I won't hurt him. That's not instinct, that's learned. Pellex crouched just out of splash range. He has no concept of your medical expertise. He cannot measure your competency. Doesn't have to. He measures consistency. I do the same thing every time, talk the same way, move the same way. That builds something, repetition over logic, predictability over fear. Pellex tapped a short note into his datapad, then paused. This method of bonding, it is not limited to this species. Sawyer wrung out the brush. Not even close. You ever heard of horses? I have seen archive footage, enormous, hooves, no apparent utility in space. Yeah, but people still bring them planetside. They're skittish, but if you earn their trust, they'll walk through fire for you. And how do you earn their trust? By showing them you won't be the one lighting the fire. Boots shook out his fur, flinging suds in every direction. Pellex stood so abruptly that his datapad clattered to the floor. I warned you, Sawyer said, grinning. I was assured this station was sealed against volatile liquids. It's just soap and water. That is not comforting. Sawyer grabbed a towel and began drying the dog off. You know, you keep observing us like we're a puzzle to solve, but some things aren't meant to be solved. Pellex retrieved his pad and wiped it with a sterilized cloth. You are suggesting I cease my analysis? I'm suggesting sometimes the answer isn't in the data. I require patterns to understand. So does Boots. He just reads different ones. There was a knock, if it could be called that, at the entrance. A Zarlian security officer, carapace gleaming and antennae twitching, entered with a sealed package. Delivery for human Sawyer. Contents: 1 case of freeze-dried poultry-based nutritional units. Dog treats, Sawyer corrected, accepting the box. Thanks. The Zarlian's antennae dipped. You are aware this constitutes non-standard cargo, got clearance through the Nutrition Council. He's got dietary needs. The Zarlian turned to leave but paused. The creature barked at me yesterday. He does that. It was not hostile. Merely loud. Then you're good. After the officer left, Pellex approached the box cautiously. You submitted a formal request to modify food intake logistics for a non-sentient. He's part of my crew now. You are not assigned a crew. Then he's my partner. Pellex stared at the dog, now happily tearing apart the shipping insulation. And what, precisely, does your partner contribute? He keeps me sane. That is not quantifiable. Neither is homesickness, but we still feel it. Pellex said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, I have been monitoring your circadian rhythms. You wake earlier than necessary, you pace. You eat less than half of your allocated rations. Sawyer straightened. Didn't realize you were tracking that. I was concerned. You claimed recovery from the animal's bite, but your behavior shifted. Wasn't the bite. Then what? Sawyer hesitated, then resumed toweling off Boots. I've been stationed on 6 planets in the last 2 years. This one's the quietest. No storms, no crowd noise, just synthetic hum and recycled air. You find that unsettling? I find it lonely. Pellex sat down on the bench opposite him, for once not trying to maintain distance. Your species struggles with extended isolation. We're built for connection, even if it's with a drooling misfit like this. Boots sneezed on the towel. Pellex tilted his head. You brought him here to mitigate psychological strain. Didn't plan it like that. He just helps. Pellex opened his datapad and typed for a full minute without speaking. What now? Sawyer asked. I am submitting a behavioral stability report. Recommending that the canine remain on station as a sanctioned support entity. You're serious. His presence correlates with a measurable decrease in your stress indicators and a marked improvement in your sleep cycle. Sawyer looked down at Boots. Guess you're getting a badge, buddy. Boots barked once, then resumed chewing a corner of the towel. Pellex stood. There is one condition. Hit me. I would like to attempt interaction, Sawyer gestured. Floor's yours. Pellex crouched, slowly extended one lower hand. Boots sniffed it, then licked it with a slobbery swipe of approval. The Yavnari's face twitched. It is. Warm. Means he likes you. I am uncertain if I reciprocate. Give it time. Later that evening, Pellex escorted Sawyer to the mess hall, where a small table had been discreetly modified to include a padded mat underfoot. Boots curled up beneath it, tail twitching gently as he drifted to sleep. To the casual observer, it looked like a man dining with a particularly odd-looking alien. To Pellex, it was a study in symbiosis. I believe I am beginning to understand, he said between sips of a nutrient blend. Understand what? Why you reacted the way you did? Why you minimized the injury? It wasn't indifference, it was prioritization. Exactly. You weighed the risk of infection against the value of the relationship. Not consciously, but yeah. Pellex nodded. In that case, I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming you were irrational. Sawyer raised his cup. Apology accepted. Boots snored softly. Pellex glanced down. I also purchased a grooming comb. In case you require assistance. Doc, Sawyer said with a grin, you're becoming dangerously close to a dog person. I am merely interested in the mechanisms of bonding. Whatever helps you sleep. Pellex looked down at Boots. He is. Not unpleasant. And for the first time, he didn't immediately sanitize his hands.